In 1946, 18-year-old Paula Jean Welden was a student at Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont, where she studied art, though she was considering changing her major to botany. When not in school, she lived with her parents and her 3 younger sisters in Stamford, Connecticut. By all accounts, she was a true creative soul. She loved painting in all sorts of mediums, playing guitar, and spending time outdoors. In fact, she was a fairly experienced hiker and camper. So when she vanished in the winter of 1946 after leaving for a hike, it came as a surprise to everybody who knew her. Paula was last seen on December 1st when she worked the breakfast and lunch shifts at her university's dining hall. After finishing up, she headed from her dorm in Dewey Hall, chatting with her roommate for a while before announcing that she planned to take a study break and go for a hike. She reportedly tried to get some of her friends to join her that afternoon, but they had other plans. Paula left campus just after 2:30 p.m. While she was reportedly dressed for the weather, she was not adequately prepared for how cold it would become when the temperatures dropped that night. She also left behind most of her money, carrying little to no cash at the time, as well as a check given to her by her parents for living expenses. Furthermore, she took no extra clothing and didn't even carry a backpack. A passing driver, a contractor named Louis Knapp, picked Paula up at around 2:45 p.m. as she thumbed for a lift near campus on State Route 67A. She informed him that she was heading to the long trail off Route 9 near Glastonbury Mountain and was dropped off on Route 9 about 2.5 miles from the trail. The 18-year-old was last seen at 4 p.m. when she asked a group of hikers how far the trail ran. One of them explained that it went all the way to Canada. Afterwards, she continued walking along the route in a northerly direction. This part of the route today is known as Harbor Road. Ahead of her was a wooded area, and there are some theories that she may have walked into the darkening area as the sun set at around 5 o'clock that evening. Paula was never seen or heard from again. Temperatures dropped that night, and it also began snowing. Paula's roommate became worried in the morning when she realized that the 18-year-old hadn't come home the previous night. She had initially believed that she'd gone to study after coming back from her hike, but when she wasn't there that morning, she concluded that something was off. She notified the school of the disappearance, but her family were not alerted until the following Monday. At this time, students were supposed to sign themselves out if they planned to stay out past 11 p.m. before checking in with campus security, but Paula hadn't done this. The school immediately began to search the campus for any signs of her, while the Bennington County State's Attorney was told about the disappearance and the county sheriff was roped in to assist with the search. Over the next few days, it came to light that Paula had been on the long trail on the day of her disappearance. She had failed to tell her friends where specifically she planned to hike, but the group of hikers she'd spoken to that afternoon saw that she was missing in the newspaper and came forward with what they knew. For weeks, law enforcement searched for the missing 18-year-old. The university closed for several days, while both employees and students alike helped to look for Paula, but no sign of her was ever found. Hundreds of volunteers, family members, National Guard troops and firefighters all assisted in the hunt, while ground and air searches explored the long trail, but found nothing. Theories about what happened to Paula on the afternoon of December 1st vary greatly. Some people assisting in the search believed she had gotten lost in the dark woods and succumbed to the elements, while authorities entertained the idea that she had been in unusually good spirits and decided to leave her old life behind to start a new one, eloping with an unknown secret partner, despite the fact it was reported in some sources that Paula had never dated. But it was also theorized that perhaps she had become injured and suffered from amnesia, was depressed, and had taken her own life, or that she'd been forcibly taken while out hiking and killed by some unknown party. Her friends and family felt it was unlikely that she'd taken her own life, as her personal problems were no worse than any other girl her age, and she had not exhibited signs of depression. When Paula disappeared, Vermont didn't have its own state police organization. While officers from Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York assisted with the investigation, much of the evidence gathering was left down to the state's attorney, county sheriff, and state investigator. Most of the additional aid was only brought in once Paula's father, a wealthy and influential industrial engineer, put pressure on Vermont's governor, Raymond Baldwin. Baldwin brought in state policewoman Dorothy Scoville and assigned her to the case, along with Connecticut State Police Detective Robert Rundle. The pair interviewed individuals who saw, or believed they saw, the 18-year-old on the day of her disappearance, including people who lived near Long Trail or happened to be out near the area that day. During their investigation, it came to light that one of the last people to see Paula alive was a lumberjack named Fred Gadet, who lived along Harbor Road. He was reportedly having a fight with his girlfriend when the 18-year-old walked by, and Gadet then stormed off in a rage afterwards. He gave differing statements to the police about his subsequent movements, however. In one account, he mentioned going back to his shack and spending the evening alone. In another, he drove up the travel portion of the trail, the same way Paula was heading. In 1946, Gadet was considered a person of interest and was known to have lied to investigators on several occasions. He became a person of interest again in 1952 when the case was re-examined. He allegedly told at least 2 individuals that he knew where Paula's remains were buried, but later tried to brush this off as idle talk and claimed that he was lying. Another hypothesis in Paula's case was that her own father was involved in her disappearance. Shortly before she went missing, she had cancelled plans that involved her returning home to her family for Thanksgiving. She told her roommate that she and her father had a disagreement. According to a news article from the Bennington Banner, which contradicts the information found on Paula's Charlie Project page, the 18-year-old did have some sort of boyfriend whom her father had taken a disliking to. He believed this boyfriend had something to do with the disappearance, but couldn't explain why, and had no evidence to suggest his involvement. Paula's father also disappeared for 36 hours during the search for his missing daughter, although reportedly he had gone to chase up a lead involving a witness sighting of Paula in Massachusetts and had failed to inform anybody where he was going. One other theory in the case was brought to light by an American author named Joseph A. Citro. He pointed out that between 1945 and 1950, several people vanished in an area of southwestern Vermont, which he dubbed the Bennington Triangle. The area is centered on Glastonbury Mountain and includes many of the surrounding towns, including Bennington, Somerset, Woodford, and Glastonbury. On November 12, 1945, 74-year-old Middy River vanished while out near Long Trail and Route 9. According to Citro, he was the first victim in the string of disappearances within the so-called Bennington Triangle. Accompanied by 4 others, Middy was spending his weekend hunting in the mountains. That morning, he and his son-in-law, Joe Lawson, walked together until they reached a fork in the path. They decided to separate, with Middy stating that he'd only be going a short distance and that he'd rejoin the group at camp for lunch. But Middy never showed up. The rest of the hunting party began to look for the elderly man before they notified the authorities. Upon their arrival, investigators carried out an extensive search of the area but found little evidence of Middy. The only item of interest they recovered was a single rifle cartridge located in a stream. It is thought that perhaps Middy leaned over and the cartridge fell from his pocket. Middy's disappearance was unusual, as despite his age, he was an experienced outdoorsman and was familiar with the area and in good health. Paula was the next one to go missing in December of 1946, but she wasn't the last. The third disappearance occurred on December 1st, 1949. 68-year-old veteran James Tedford was a resident of the Bennington Soldiers' Home and was last seen at a St. Albans bus station after visiting his wife in Franklin. Witnesses placed James getting onto the bus, where he remained for a good portion of the journey. However, he allegedly vanished between the last stop and Bennington. Bizarrely, his belongings were still on the bus in the luggage rack, and a bus timetable lay open on his empty seat. Notably, however, it seems that some time passed between when James was last seen and when he was reported missing. He did not, as some would suggest, simply vanish into thin air while on public transport. Like Paula and Middy, James was never found. On October 12, 1950, 8-year-old Paul Jepson vanished after being left unsupervised for an hour. Before he vanished, he'd been in a truck with his mother. She left him alone in the vehicle so that she could feed the pigs. When she returned, the little boy had gone. She was quick to alert the authorities, who arrived at the scene and began organizing search parties. Despite an extensive comb through the area, no trace of the 8-year-old was discovered. Notably, Paul had been wearing a bright red jacket at the time of his disappearance, something that would be difficult to miss in the autumnal surroundings when he vanished. Reportedly, scent dogs traced the boy to a crossroad near Glastonbury Mountain, but no evidence was recovered from the area, and the dogs then lost the trail. The last victim in this string of disappearances was 53-year-old Frida Langer, who went missing 16 days after Paul had vanished. On October 28, 1950, Frida and her cousin, Herbert Elsner, departed from their campsite near the Somerset Reservoir to go on a hike. During the journey, the 53-year-old slipped and fell into a stream. She did not appear to be injured, and afterwards told her cousin that she'd head back to the campsite to get changed and then catch up with him. However, Frida never reunited with Herbert. He returned to the campsite in concern to find that none of their other family members, whom they'd been camping with, had seen her since the pair left earlier. Over the course of the next 14 days, 5 searches were conducted involving 300 people, as well as helicopters, but despite their best efforts, no sign of the 53-year-old was found. On May 12, 1951, 7 months after Frida was last seen, her body was discovered 3.5 miles from the campsite. She was in the water in the eastern branch of the Deerfield River. This area had previously been searched, but only briefly. Due to the state of Frida's remains, her cause of death was never determined. She was the last person connected to the Bennington Triangle. The cases of Midi River, James Tedford, Paul Jepson, and Frida Langer have never been solved. It is unknown if foul play or suspicious circumstances were involved in their disappearances, or if their cases were in any way linked to Paula's. Investigators, at least, never tied these unsolved cases together. Unfortunately, with no known witnesses, no body, and no evidence, Paula's case was never solved, and it's unknown if Fred Gadet was truly involved in her disappearance. The handling of the case received its fair share of criticism as well, both from the public and from Paula's father. The local sheriffs were badly trained, and the fact that Vermont had no state police meant that the investigation did not run as smoothly as it could have. In July of 1947, less than 8 months after the disappearance, the Vermont State Police was created. Paula Jean Welden was just 18 when she disappeared from Bennington, Vermont. She was last seen on Harbor Road on the long trail off Route 9, near Glastonbury Mountain. Paula is described as a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. She had a greyish-coloured scar on her left knee, a small scar under her left brow, and a vaccination scar on her right thigh. Additionally, she had a cleft chin and an upturned nose. At the time of her disappearance, Paula was 5'5" and weighed around 122 pounds. When she left for her hike, she was wearing a red parka with a fur-trimmed hood, blue jeans, white top-sider trainers with heavy soles, and a small gold ladies' wristwatch with a narrow black band. The watch has the repairer's marking 13050HD scratched on the inside of the black case. If Paula is still alive, she will be 94 years old. If you have any information about her disappearance, you can contact the Vermont State Police at 802-241-5355. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.